Hello everyone, BlazeCraft here, bringing you yet another episode. And last time we were about Raven Hill again, right after we permit. So, yeah. 1 2 1 2. Making sure the microphone is working.
Good day to you.
I'm sure you can find plenty of ribs in Raven Hill as well, but you might not want to wander so far at night. Ah, thanks. This will do just the trick. Take this note to Elo Ebelnock, the mayor of Darkshire. He and I are all friends. And when he reads it and discovers what you did for me, I'm sure he'll be as happy as I am. Ha 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 ha, laughed he.
See you around.
The letter on this note seemed to flicker and dance across its surface. It is impossible to glean meaning from them. Read about the story of Morgan Laddymore. Morgan Laddymore was a great and noble knight who fought in defense of the innocent, the poor and the afflicted. For many years he worked diligently throughout the outlying areas of Azeroth, bringing relief to the suffering and swift justice to evil. He was married to a young girl named Liz. In the summer of his 18th year, they were much in love with each other and would eventually produce 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. Morgan was 32 when war broke out. Lordaeron Morgan was called to the side of the legendary paladin Uther the Lightbringer to fight against the orcs and the undead. Leaving his wife and children in the safety of his home, Morgan left for war. The years passed and the war dragged on, and Morgan would witness many horrific events, including the disbanding of the Paladins of the Silver Hand and death of Uther, and the spread of the plague. The only thing that kept him from the brink of madness was the knowledge that he would someday be reunited with his wife and children. Morgan would eventually return to his homeland, but find it nothing like how he remembered it. The once verdant forest was corrupted and teemed with the undead and other dark forces. Destroyed houses and farms could be found everywhere, and the cemetery near Raven Hill now dominated much of the area. A shocked and bewildered Morgan eventually made his way to his home, only to find it in ruins. Not knowing what had befallen his homeland, he headed towards the village to find answers, and he hoped his wife and children. Morgan inquired about his family, but could not find any answers. A priest in Darkshire, as it was now called, said that he might search the cemetery at Raven Hill for a gravestone. Morgan refused to believe that his family was dead, and continued to search every farm and house in Duskwood, but to no avail. Morgan rode from Darkshire to nearby Lakeshire, thinking that perhaps his family had fled. On his way there, he decided against his better judgment to stop by the Raven Hill Cemetery. Morgan spent hours walking amongst the gravestones. He recognized many names of people that he knew and became more and more struck. Then he saw them, a small, untended plot amongst the many with 3 small gravestones. A feeling of dread washed over him as he approached. Morgan brushed off the dust of the most prominent gravestone to reveal the name on it. Simply carved upon the grave, letters spelled out his worst fear: Liz Ladimore, beloved wife and mother. Morgan's apprehension turned to dismay, and then to grief, and he fell to his knees weeping. For hours he stared at the one grave, begging the cold stone for forgiveness and sobbing apologies. Then hours later, something in him snapped, and he began to lash out. Brought his sword out of his scabbard and began to rain blows on the gravestones, screaming in rage. Blind in his fury, he lashed out and swung wildly, catching the notice of a trio of the cemetery's attendants. As they tried to restrain him, he turned his focus on them, hurling accusations of guilt upon the innocent attendants, then killed them all. Later, when the rage has passed, realization crept into Morgan's mind, and he saw his bloody sword driven into the chest of one of the attendants. Driven to the brink of his emotions, he removed his belt knife and plunged it into his heart. Morgan Ladimore's body and the 3 bodies of his victims were found. The next day he was quickly buried without ceremony in a hastily dug grave on the outskirts of the cemetery, because Morgan committed murder against innocence, something that went completely against his beliefs and his nature, and because of the grief that he held in being unable to save his family. Morgan could not die in a peaceful death and lived on as one of the restless dead. Only days later his grave was disturbed and his body could not be found. The being that was Morgan now wanders Duskwood, consumed by his grief over the loss of his wife and children and his own self-hatred. Morgan Ladim, as he now calls himself, roams Duskwood with mindless vengeance and hatred, and has been known to commit murder indiscriminately. The sad story of Morgan. One, two, 1, 2. Sorry, I had to do mic check.
King's honor, friend.
A letter? What's this all about? Tello looks at the letter and immediately pales. You fool! You've doomed us all! You're not the first fool to be manipulated by Abercrombie. The last doddering old man is known as the Embalmer to us. He's a vile necromancer and a blight upon this town. And now, sewn together and given life by the very materials you brought him. His horrible creation approaches. That hideous creature will be upon us in mere moments. If you have any heart, Mark, you'll help the Night Watch drive off the abomination and save our town.
Go with honor, friend.
Bitches is coming. Oh no. What have I done? How was I supposed to know? Seems so that wherever I go, everything burns in ruin.
Greetings.
Thank the light he's gone. I'll say you've made amends by helping save the lives of those here, Landmark.
Be careful.
Ner'zhul and his followers entered the Twisted Nether, the ethereal plane that connects all of the worlds scattered throughout the great dark beyond. Unfortunately, Kil'jaeden and his demonic minions were waiting for them. Kil'jaeden, who had sworn to take vengeance on Ner'zhul for this right defiance, slowly tore the old shaman's body apart piece by piece. Kil'jaeden kept the shaman's spirit alive and intact, thus leaving Ner'zhul painfully aware of his body's gross dismemberment. Though Ner'zhul's pleaded with the demon to release his So Ner'zhul pleaded with the demon to release his spirit and grant him death. The demon grimly replied that the blood pact they had made long ago was still binding, and that Ner'zhul still had a purpose to serve. The orcs' failure to conquer the world for the Burning Legion forced Kil'jaeden to create a new army to sow chaos throughout the kingdoms of Azeroth. This new army could not be allowed to fall prey to the same petty rivalries and infighting that had plagued the Horde. It would have to be merciless and single-minded in its mission. This time Kil'jaeden could not afford to fail. Holding Ner'zhul's spirit helpless in stasis, Kil'jaeden gave him one last chance to serve the Legion or suffer eternal torment. Once again, Ner'zhul recklessly agreed to the demon's pact. Ner'zhul's spirit was placed within a special crafted block of diamond hard ice, gathered from the far reaches of the twisting nether. Encased within the frozen cast, Ner'zhul felt his consciousness expand 10,000-fold, wrapped by the demon's chaotic powers. Ner'zhul became a special being of unfathomable power. At that moment, the Horde known as Ner'zhul was shattered forever, and the Lich King was born. Ner'zhul's loyal Death Knights and Shadow Moon followers were also transformed by the demonic's chaos energy. The wicked spellcasters were ripped apart and remade as skeletal liches. The demons has entrusted that even in death, Ner'zhul's followers would serve him unquestioningly. When the time was right, Kil'jaeden explained the mission for which he had created the Lich King. Ner'zhul wasn't to spread a plague of death and terror across Azeroth and would snuff out human civilization forever. All those who died for the dreaded plague would arise as undead, and their spirits would be bound to Ner'zhul's iron will forever. Kil'jaeden promised that if Ner'zhul accomplishes his dark mission of scouring humanity from the world, he would be freed from his curse and granted a new healthy body to inhabit. Though Ner'zhul was agreeable and seemingly anxious to play his part, Kil'jaeden remained skeptical of his pawn's loyalties. Keeping the Lich King bodiless and trapped within the crystal cask assured his good conduct for the short term. But the demon knew that he would need to keep a watchful eye on him. To this end, Kil'jaeden called upon his elite demon guard, the vampiric dreadlords, to police Ner'zhul and ensure that he accomplishes his dread task. Icondrius, the most powerful and cunning of the dreadlords, warmed to the challenge. He was fascinated by the plague's severity and the Lich King's unbridled potential for genocide. That's a bit of lore there. About the Lich King. Lord Lothar rallied the remnants of Azeroth's army after their defeat at Stormwind Keep, and then launched a massive exodus across the sea to the northern kingdom of Lordaeron. Convinced that the Horde would overcome all humanity if left unchecked, the leaders of the 7 human nations met and agreed to unite in what would become known as the Alliance of Lordaeron. For the first time in nearly 3,000 years, these desperate nations of Arathor were once again united under a common banner. Appointed as Supreme Commander of the Alliance forces, Lord Lothar prepared his armies for the coming of the Horde. He led by his lieutenants Uther the Lightbringer, Admiral Dalian Prowlmore, and Turalian Lothar, was able to convince Lordaeron demi-human races of the impending threats as well. The Alliance succeeded in gaining the support of the Stoic Dwarves of Ironforge and a small number of High Elves of Quel'Thalas. The Elves, led at that time by Anasterian Sunstrider, were largely uninterested in committing conflict. However, they were duty-bound to aid Lothar because he was the last descendant of the Arathi bloodline which had aided the elves in ages past. The Horde, now led by War Chief Doomhammer, brought in ogres from its homeworld of Draenor and conscripted the disenfranchised Mani Forest Trolls into its fold, setting out on a massive campaign to overrun the dwarf kingdom of Cosmodon and the southern reaches of Lordaeron. The Horde effortlessly decimated all opposition. The epic battles of the Second War ranged from large-scale naval skirmishes to massive aerial dogfights. Somehow the Horde had unearthed the powerful artifact known as the Demon's Soul and used it to enslave the ancient Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, threatening to destroy their precious eggs. The Horde forced Alexstrasza to send her grown children to war. The noble red dragons were forced to fight for the Horde, and fight they did. The war raged across the continents of Cosmodon, Lordaeron, and Azeroth itself. As part of his northern campaign, the Horde succeeded in the burning down of the borderlands of Quel'Thalas, thereby ensuring the Elves' final commitment to the Alliance cause. The greater cities and townships of Lordaeron were razed and devastated by the conflict, despite the absence of reinforcements and overwhelming odds. Lothar and his allies succeeded in holding their enemies at bay. However, during the final days of the Second War, as the Horde's victory over the Alliance seemed almost assured, a terrible feud erupted between the two most powerful orcs of Azeroth. As Doomhammer prepared his final assault against capital city of Lordaeron, an assault that would have crushed the last remnants of the Alliance, Gul'dan and his followers abandoned the posts and set out to sea. The bewildered Doomhammer, having lost nearly half of his standing forces to Gul'dan's treachery, was forced to pull back and forsake his greatest chance at victory over the Alliance. The power-hungry Gul'dan, obsessed with obtaining Goodhood itself, set out on a desperate search for the undersea tomb of Sargeras that have believed held the secrets of ultimate power. Having already doomed his fellow orcs to become the slaves of the Burning Legion, Gul'dan thought nothing of his supposed duty to Doomhammer. Backed by the Stormriver and Twilight's Hammer clans, Gul'dan succeeded in raising the tomb of Sargeras from the sea floor. However, when he opened the ancient flooded vault, he found only crazed demons awaiting him. Seeking to punish the wayward orcs for their costly betrayal, Doomhammer sent his forces to kill Gul'dan and bring renegades back into the fold. For his recklessness, Gul'dan was torn apart by the maddened demons he had set loose. With their leader dead, the renegade clans quickly fell before Doomhammer's enraged legions. Though the rebellion had been quelled, the Horde was unable to recoup the terrible losses it had suffered. Gul'dan's betrayal had afforded the Alliance not only hope, but also time to regroup and retaliate. Lord Lothar, seeing that the Horde was fracturing from within, gathered the last of his forces and pushed Doomhammer south back into the shattered Herald of Stormwind. There the Alliance forces trapped the retreating Horde within the volcanic forces of Blackrock Spire. Though Lord Lothar fell in battle at the Spire's base, his Lieutenant Turalyon rallied the Alliance forces at the 11th hour and drove the Horde back into the abysmal Swamp of Sorrows. Turalyon's forces succeeded in destroying the Dark Portal, the mystical gateway that connected the orcs to their homeworld of Draenor. Cut off from its reinforcements and fractured by infighting, the Horde finally bucked in upon itself and fell before the might of the Alliance. Scattered orc clans were quickly rounded up and placed within guarded internment camps. Though it seemed that the Horde had been defeated for good, some remained highly skeptical that peace would last. Khadgar, now an archmage of some renown, convinced the Allies' high command to build the fortress of Nethergrade that would watch over the ruins of the Dark Portal and ensure that there would be no further invasions from Draenor. Right, that's a bit of lore for you guys. Like this video if you like it, subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you guys next time.